The CEO, the cleaner, and the child. A midnight revelation. Our stories have traveled far. Where are you watching from today? Share with us in the comments. The scent of cleaning products clung to her clothes, her hair, her skin. Maria wiped the damp cloth over the vast conference table one last time, feeling a dull ache at the base of her back. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest. In her arms, strapped in a makeshift sling she'd fashioned from an old sheet, little Leo slept deeply and peacefully, his chest rising and falling in a soft rhythm. He was her world, her reason, the most precious weight she would carry for the rest of her life. And it was for him that she was here, at 2 a.m, cleaning the luxurious offices of Zenith Corp. This job was both a curse and a blessing. Precarious, poorly paid, exhausting. But it was the only one that accepted her with a baby. The only one that allowed her to stay with Leo, watching his every breath. The memories of job interviews, of the disapproving glances when they saw she was a mother with an infant, still hurt her. Here, in the solitude of the night, no one judged her. She was just a shadow, an anonymous figure who left everything clean and tidy for the next day. Invisibility was the price of keeping her son close. Only one room remained, the largest of them all, the CEO's office. She pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. The place was breathtaking. An entire glass wall showcased the city like a carpet of diamonds. The furniture was dark and imposing, and in the corner, a large, soft leather sofa seemed to whisper her name. Exhaustion hit her with immense force. Her eyelids weighed a ton. Just 1 minute, she thought, the idea surfacing like a mirage in the desert. I'll just sit for a minute, to rest my eyes. Leo is sleeping so well. She walked to the sofa, feeling guilty and at the same time desperate for relief. She sank into the soft leather, and the comfort was almost painful. She adjusted Leo's tiny body in her lap, ensuring he remained comfortable, and leaned her head back. The silence of the room, the warmth of her baby, and the accumulated fatigue from months of sleepless nights were an impossible combination to resist. In seconds, without her realizing it, Maria fell asleep. An unexpected encounter. Not long after, the soft sound of expensive shoes on polished marble cut through the silence of the floor. Arthur Sterling was walking towards his office, feeling energized by the night of work still ahead of him. But as he opened his office door, he stopped. His eyes, accustomed to seeking out details and imperfections, immediately focused on the huddled figure on his sofa. A woman, a cleaner, judging by the uniform, was sleeping. Irritation was his first reaction, cold and immediate. Unacceptable audacity. He approached, his jaw clenched, ready to wake her with the severity that everyone at Zenith knew and feared. But then he saw, nestled against her chest, almost hidden, was a baby. A tiny human being, sleeping peacefully, protected by his mother's arms. Arthur froze. The scene struck him in a way that left him completely speechless. The anger dissolved, giving way to an unknown emotion, a sharp pang in his chest that caught him by surprise. He looked at the woman's face. Exhaustion was etched in every feature. It was the pure image of vulnerability and sacrifice. In that sterile environment of power, it was the most human thing he had seen in years. With a care that was unlike him, he lightly touched her shoulder. "Ma'am," he called in a low voice. Maria's awakening was a shock. Her eyes snapped open in panic, and her body stiffened. The first thing she did was hold Leo tighter, as if to shield him from imminent danger. She saw the tall man, the boss, and despair overwhelmed her. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'm so sorry," she stammered, trying to get up hastily. "I didn't mean to fall asleep, I swear. It was only for a moment. Please, I need this job. Please, don't fire me." Her voice was a trembling thread, laden with genuine fear. Arthur saw the terror in her eyes and felt terrible for scaring her. He raised his hands in a calming gesture. "It's all right," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I won't do anything. Please don't worry." Maria stopped, looking at him with immense confusion. She expected shouts, a summary dismissal. But the man in front of her, the feared Arthur Sterling, seemed genuinely concerned. "Rest a little," he insisted. He took off his expensive coat and extended it towards her. "It's cold in here. Use this to cover yourselves." She looked from the cashmere coat to his face, completely lost. Her mind couldn't grasp the kindness. The man who had the power to destroy her only source of livelihood was, instead, offering comfort. That simple gesture was so unexpected, so contrary to everything she knew of that world, that it left her speechless, her heart pounding for a reason that was no longer fear, but a deep and shocking disbelief. A veil of generosity. Maria gazed at the coat extended towards her as if it were an object from another planet. It was dark, made of a fabric that looked soft and warm, and she could smell the faint masculine perfume coming from it. An expensive, discreet aroma that didn't belong to her world of disinfectant and baby powder. Her mind, still hazy from sleep and shock, struggled to understand. That man, the owner of everything, was offering her his own coat. The kindness was so unexpected that it felt like a trap. "No need, sir. I'm fine," she replied, her voice little more than a whisper. She tried to shrink, attempting to appear smaller, less visible. "I'm already up. I'll get back to work right now." Her survival instinct told her to refuse, to accept nothing, to become the invisible cleaner again as quickly as possible. Accepting the coat felt like crossing a line she shouldn't even approach. Arthur didn't move his arm. His expression remained serious, but there was no anger in his eyes. There was something else, something Maria couldn't identify. "Please, take it. I insist," he said, and his voice, though low, had an unquestionable tone of command. "You and your son need to get warm. I won't take no for an answer." Maria's heart pounded uncontrollably. Refusing again seemed impossible, an act of defiance that could cost her job. With trembling hands, she reached out and took the coat. The weight was surprising, and the cashmere was softer than anything she had ever touched. Carefully, she draped it over her shoulders and over Leo's sleeping little body, creating a warm, protective cocoon. The relief of the warmth was immediate, and she felt an involuntary shiver. As she settled, Arthur watched her. Her every movement, every hesitation, affected him in a strange way. He was a man of logic, of numbers, of results. Emotions were weaknesses in the business world, distractions to be controlled. But what he felt now was uncontrollable. He saw the dignity in that woman, even in the most humiliating situation. He saw the strength in her exhaustion. He was no longer seeing an employee who broke a rule. He was seeing a mother protecting her child. And, for a reason he didn't understand, he felt an immense need to protect them too. To break the intensity of the moment, he moved away. He walked silently to his enormous mahogany desk on the other side of the room and sat in his leather chair. He turned on his computer, the screen's glow illuminating his face. He pretended to focus on a spreadsheet, but his attention was entirely on the sofa. He could feel her presence in the room, a silent and frightened presence that completely changed the energy of his sanctuary of power. He wondered about her life, about what could have led her to such a desperate situation. Outsourced employees were just numbers in a contract to him, a cost to be managed. Now, one of them had a face, a name he didn't even know, and a child. Maria remained motionless on the sofa. She watched the CEO, who seemed to have returned to his world, ignoring her completely. What did that mean? Would he let her stay there? She looked down at Leo's serene little face, which hadn't even stirred. That expensive coat covered him, protecting him from the cold air conditioning. A gesture of kindness from a man she should fear. She couldn't relax. Her body was still tense, waiting for him to get up at any moment and say it was all a cruel joke. But the minutes passed, and he remained at his desk, the only sound being the soft click of the computer keys. Slowly, a part of Maria's fear began to transform into a deep and painful gratitude. That man hadn't humiliated her. He hadn't exposed her. He had given her warmth and a moment of peace. The executive's burden. After what felt like an eternity, Arthur stood up. Maria held her breath. This was it. He walked towards her, but stopped at a respectful distance. "I need to go to another room for a call," he said, his voice neutral again. "Stay here. Rest as long as you need to feel better. Then you can finish what's left and go home." He didn't wait for a response. He simply turned and left the office, closing the door softly behind him. Maria was left alone in the absolute silence, enveloped in the coat that still carried his scent. The scent of Arthur Sterling. The name echoed in her mind, bringing with it the weight of years of bitterness. That was the man who had orchestrated the destruction of her career, the architect of her misery. And yet, the same man had just covered her son with his own coat, showing a kindness she never thought possible from him. The contradiction was so brutal that it left her breathless. She hugged Leo a little tighter, feeling the tears she had held back with so much effort finally stream down her face. They were tears of relief, yes, but also of a confusion so deep and frightening that it was worse than the anger she expected to find. Arthur didn't go to another meeting room. The story about the call was the first excuse that came to mind to escape the intensity that filled his office. He needed air, distance. He took the private elevator and went up to the terrace, a space he rarely used. The cold morning wind hit his face, but he barely felt it. His mind was fixated on the image of the woman huddled on his sofa, with the baby sleeping on her chest. The image wouldn't leave him. He leaned against the glass railing, looking at the city stretching out at his feet. He was the king of that universe of concrete and lights, a master in a power game where weakness was not an option. For years, he had built walls around himself, convinced that emotions were a dangerous luxury he couldn't afford. His employees were pieces on a chessboard, his competitors' obstacles to be removed. He never thought about the lives behind the badges and uniforms. They were invisible, part of the machinery that made his empire run. But that woman, with her exhaustion and her desperate love for her son, had broken something inside him. She wasn't a piece. She was a person, struggling to survive in a world he helped create, inside a building that bore his name. The gesture of offering the coat was an impulse, a human reaction he hadn't had time to suppress. Now, in the cold of dawn, he knew it wasn't enough. That impulse had turned into a responsibility. Letting her continue in that situation, working to exhaustion with a baby in her arms, suddenly seemed unacceptable, unbearable. He didn't know her name. He knew nothing about her. But he made a decision. He would help her. Truly. Downstairs, Maria remained seated for long minutes after the door closed. The silence was total, but her mind was in a noisy chaos. Finally, with a trembling sigh, she stood up. With reverent care, she folded the heavy cashmere coat and placed it on the sofa cushion, right where she had been sitting. It felt wrong to take it, like taking a piece of a world she would never belong to. With quick and efficient movements, she finished cleaning the office. Every gesture was automatic, her body working on autopilot, while her head tried to process the strangeness of that night. The anger she felt for Arthur Sterling, an ember she had kept burning for years, was now confused, mixed with a gratitude that made her sick. When the first rays of sun appeared, she left the Zenith Corp building, holding Leo a little tighter. The journey home on 2 crowded buses seemed longer than usual, and she arrived at her small apartment feeling a weariness that went far beyond the physical. The next day passed quickly. She barely slept, her mind still replaying the encounter. Around noon, her phone rang, the jarring sound making her jump. It was an unknown number from a landline. Hesitantly, she answered. "Hello, Mrs. Maria Davis?" asked a feminine voice, professional and cold. Maria's heart froze. "Yes, that's me. My name is Eleanor. I'm Mr. Arthur Sterling's assistant. I'm calling at his request. Mr. Sterling requests your presence in his office today at 2 in the afternoon." So that was it. The kindness of the night before was just a postponement. Now would come the punishment. The humiliation of being personally fired by the company owner. "Did something happen? Was there a problem with my work?" she asked, her voice weak and trembling. "I don't have that information, ma'am," the assistant replied with the same professional distance. "I was just instructed to schedule the meeting. Mr. Sterling will be waiting for you at 2. Please don't be late." The call ended. Maria stood in the middle of her small living room, the phone still in her hand. She looked at Leo, who was babbling happily in his playpen, oblivious to everything. The fear for herself was nothing compared to the fear of failing him. She took a deep breath, trying to find some strength. She didn't know what to expect from that meeting, but she knew she had to go. She had to face Arthur Sterling once more, not as the strong lawyer she once was, but as the terrified cleaner he now saw. And she only prayed to God not to break down in front of him. The reckoning, the executive floor of Zenith Corp was imposing. The air was colder, the silence deeper, and everything, from the thick carpet under her feet to the artwork on the walls, whispered power and money. Maria felt like an intruder, small and inadequate in her simple clothes. She clutched the strap of her bag so tightly that her knuckles were white. The assistant, Eleanor, guided her down the corridor with icy efficiency, without addressing a single word to her that wasn't strictly necessary. Each step towards Arthur Sterling's office door was torture. She stopped in front of the dark wooden door, taking a deep breath, preparing herself for the impact of the dismissal. The assistant opened the door for her. "Mrs. Davis, sir." Arthur was not sitting behind his desk like a king on his throne, which surprised Maria. He was standing near the large window, looking at the city. He turned when she entered, and his face was serious, but there was none of the anger she so feared. "Thank you, Eleanor," he said, dismissing the assistant. The door closed, leaving the two of them alone. The sound of the lock clicking seemed too loud. "Mrs. Davis, please, come in. Sit down." He gestured to one of the 2 chairs in front of his desk. Maria took a few steps into the room, but remained standing, unable to relax. "Mr. Sterling, you sent for me," she said, her voice tense. She needed to get it over with. "Look, if it's about last night, I want to apologize once more. It was a grave mistake, I know. It won't happen again, I can assure you. That's not why I called you." He interrupted her, his voice calm. "I mean, not for a reprimand? What happened yesterday made me think. Please, sit down, really." With much hesitation, Maria sat on the edge of the chair, ready to get up at any moment. She watched as he sat, not in his CEO's chair, but in the other chair opposite her, shortening the distance and the barrier of power between them. That gesture made her even more suspicious. He clasped his hands, seeming to search for the right words. "Mrs. Davis, Maria, What I saw last night, you and your son, it worried me deeply, he began, looking directly at her. No one should be in a situation that demands such a sacrifice. Working all night with a baby isn't safe, neither for you nor for him. Maria listened in shocked silence. His every word was the opposite of what she expected. She couldn't understand. My company, Zenith, has resources, he continued, and I feel it's my responsibility to ensure the well-being of those who work here, even outsourced staff. Therefore, I'd like to offer you help. The word help hung in the air. Maria felt a knot form in her throat. What do you mean? She managed to ask. First, your son. We can pay for excellent full-time daycare for him, close to your home, to make your life easier, Arthur explained. Second, your job. This night shift is inhumane. We can move you to a day shift, perhaps to the daytime cleaning team, or, if you prefer, we can look for a position in another area. In the cafeteria, in archives, something that gives you nights of sleep and a more stable routine. Maria's mind reeled. Daycare, a day job. That was more than she could dream of, and that was precisely why she couldn't believe it. It was too good to be true. No one offered so much for nothing, especially him, Arthur Sterling, the ruthless man. Her fear began to transform into deep distrust. What was the price of all this? What did he want in return? He must have seen the doubt on her face. His expression softened slightly, showing a trace of frustration. He wanted her to understand that his offer was genuine. He leaned forward slightly, trying to create a connection. I'm not asking for anything in return, if that's what you're thinking, he said, as if reading her mind. Just help me understand. You seem like an intelligent woman. Your way of speaking is clear. It's clear you're capable of more. I just wanted to know what brought you to this difficult situation. What did you do before this job? The question, asked with a curiosity that seemed sincere, fell upon Maria with the weight of an avalanche. He wanted to know about her past, the past that he himself had destroyed. She looked up and stared at him, the man who offered salvation to the hell he himself had created. All the emotions of the past few years, the anger, the humiliation, the pain, rose to her throat. The truth was on the tip of her tongue. What did I do before? She repeated. And the voice that came out was no longer that of the frightened cleaner. It was firm, cold, and laden with a cutting irony that made Arthur pay closer attention. That's a very interesting question, Mr. Sterling. He observed her, noticing the immediate shift in her posture. She was no longer huddled in the chair. Her back was straight, her chin raised. Before spending my nights cleaning your company's floors, she continued, each word spoken slowly and clearly, I wore expensive suits, very similar to yours. I had a career. I had a respected name. I didn't clean meeting rooms. I commanded meeting rooms. Arthur looked at her with a surprised expression. The transformation was remarkable. The fragile woman from the night before seemed to have vanished. You were an executive? Maria let out a short, joyless laugh. Close to it. I was a lawyer. A lawyer? He repeated, his brain trying to process the information. That explained her ability to express herself. That's an honorable profession. What happened for you to change fields so drastically? He was still in problem-solving mode, without realizing that he was the problem. Maria's eyes fixed on his, and the glint he saw there was hard as steel. What happened? She said, her voice dropping to a graver tone. What happened was Zenith Corp. The mention of his own company's name hit him. For a moment, he thought she might have been a lawyer from the legal department who was laid off in some cutback. That would be simple to resolve. You worked here, in our legal department? I don't remember your face. Oh, I'm sure you don't, she said, and the sarcasm in her voice was unmistakable. "You wouldn't remember me. And I never worked for Zenith, Mr. Sterling. I worked against Zenith." The phrase hit Arthur directly. He stopped, his mind working furiously, trying to find a context for this. Against Zenith. He faced lawsuits all the time. It was the cost of doing business. But the intensity in her voice suggested something bigger. 5 years ago, she continued, seeing the confusion on his face. There was a very large labor lawsuit. Hundreds of employees from one of your factories in the Midwest. They were laid off without receiving any of their rights. A restructuring is what Zenith called it. A massacre is what we called it. The memory began to surface in Arthur's mind. 5 years ago. Yes, he remembered. It was a long and unpleasant legal battle that tarnished the company's image for a while and cost a fortune in settlements. He remembered giving clear orders to his legal team. "End this. Use all resources. We cannot lose." And they didn't lose. They won, discrediting the leadership of the lawsuit. He vaguely remembered their lawyer. A woman, his lawyer said. Aggressive and idealistic. He looked at Maria, at her tired face, at the dark circles under her eyes, at her hands calloused from hard labor. And then he tried to recall the face of that lawyer. A blurry image of a woman with her hair pulled back, with a determined expression in a courtroom. Could it be? His voice came out as a whisper, almost soundless. No, it can't be. Maria saw understanding begin to dawn in his eyes. This was the moment. I was the lead attorney in that lawsuit, the lawyer you spent months trying to discredit, the lawyer whose career you systematically destroyed with lawsuits and false accusations until no one else would hire me. She leaned forward, her voice now filled with all the pain and rage she had held for years. So, answering your question, Mr. Sterling, what brought me to this situation? It was you. You and your company. The man who now, with the best of intentions, offered help for the disaster he himself had created. The weight of truth. Arthur Sterling remained completely motionless, staring at her. The world around him seemed to lose its sound. The hum of the air conditioning, the traffic below, everything vanished. The only thing that existed was the face of the woman sitting in front of him, and the terrible accusation in her eyes. His mind, always so quick and analytical, was short-circuiting. He tried to find a flaw in her logic, an excuse, anything. He remembered telling his legal team, resolve this. For him, it was a business problem, a fire to be put out. He never wondered how they would put it out. He never cared about the details, only about the final result. Zenith's victory. He never stopped to think that on the other side of that legal battle was a person whose life he was, by his orders, destroying. He looked at her, truly looked. He saw her hands, which one day probably held expensive pens and legal documents, now rough and calloused from manual labor. He saw the exhaustion, which wasn't just from a sleepless night, but from years of struggle. And he saw Leo, the baby, in his mind. The baby he saw sleeping so peacefully, unaware that his future had already been shaped by the cold decisions made in that very room, years before he was born. The first word he managed to say was weak, pathetic, and he knew it. I didn't know. Maria laughed, a bitter sound that cut the air. Didn't know? Of course you didn't know. Men like you never know about the dirty details. You just give the orders and expect the magic to happen. Right. She adjusted herself in the chair, no longer the victim, but the prosecutor in her own trial. You didn't defeat me with arguments in court, Mr. Sterling. You destroyed me outside of it, in a calculated way. Arthur just stared at her, unable to speak. First came the lawsuit against me. She began to recount, her voice firm, listing the facts as if presenting a case. An accusation of frivolous litigation. They said I was suing Zenith for revenge without proof. Then came the leaks to the press. Notes in newspaper columns suggesting my conduct was unethical. Suddenly, my phone stopped ringing. Old clients who adored me canceled contracts. No one wanted to hire the lawyer who dared to challenge Zenith Corp and was publicly smeared. She paused, taking a deep breath, the pain of the memory visible on her face. I lost my office, which I fought so hard to set up. I had to sell my car to pay the bills. Then, the apartment. I lost everything. Every piece of the life I built with my own effort was ripped away from me. And why? So Zenith could save some money, and so you could sleep soundly, undisturbed by the lives you crushed along the way. Her voice finally faltered on the last sentence, raw emotion coming to the surface. Every word was a direct blow to Arthur. The offer of help he made minutes before now sounded like an insult, a bad joke. Daycare, a better job. It was like offering a glass of water to someone he himself had pushed into the desert to die. A wave of nausea rose in his throat. The air in his luxurious office suddenly seemed thin, too heavy to breathe. He stood up, his legs slightly unsteady, and walked to the window, turning his back to her. He couldn't face her. The reflection in the glass showed a man he barely recognized. Not the powerful CEO, but a coward. A man confronted with the human consequence of his ambition. The image of Maria sleeping on the sofa with the baby returned to his mind. But now it was superimposed with this new truth. It wasn't a scene of simple difficulty. It was the end result of his own actions. He was the author of that suffering. Maria, on the other side of the room, watched his broad back. Saying all that out loud left her emotionally exhausted. She expected to feel satisfaction, a sense of revenge, but she felt none of that. Only an immense emptiness. Seeing him there, broken and silent, didn't fix anything. It didn't give her back her career, her dignity, the lost years. The silence stretched, filled only by the unbearable weight of the truth that was now between them. Maria, feeling completely drained, made a move to stand up. For her, the conversation had reached a terrible end. She had told the truth. He had heard. There was nothing more to be done. That world was not hers, and his kindness was poison. "I've taken up enough of your time, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice low and tired. "I need to go." "Wait." She stopped, her hand on her bag strap. Arthur slowly turned, stepping out of the window's shadow. The man facing her now was not the same as minutes ago. The shock on his face had been replaced by a fierce, almost frightening determination. It was the face of the CEO who built an empire, but the focus of his energy had shifted direction. The problem to be solved, she realized, was himself. "Don't go yet. Sit down, please, Maria," he pleaded. And for the first time, he used her name without hesitation, as if genuinely recognizing her. Curiosity, against her better judgment, made her obey. She sat down again, her body tense, watching him with suspicion as he began to pace back and forth in front of his desk. "An apology would be useless," he began, his voice hoarse. "There are no words that can fix what I did, and money, offering money, now would just be another insult." He stopped and looked directly at her. "I took away your career. I took away your justice. I took away your name. Offering daycare and a cleaning job is a cruel joke. I understand that now. The only possible reparation is to return what I stole, not with charity, but with justice." Maria remained silent, her arms crossed over her chest, a physical barrier against his torrent of words. "I have a plan," he said, resuming his pacing. "3 steps. First, the workers' case. We're going to reopen it internally. I'm going to reverse the company's decision, and we're going to pay every penny owed to each of them, with 5 years of interest and compensation for damages. And I want you to be the special consultant for this project. You will oversee everything, ensuring that every person receives what is rightfully theirs, with a senior consultant's salary starting today. She stared at him, unblinking. The proposal was so absurd that she didn't know how to react. He didn't wait for a response. Second, this can never happen again. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to create a new department at Zenith, a labor ethics and compliance department. It will not report to legal. It will report directly to me. Its function will be to audit all our practices, layoffs, contracts, and I want you to be the director of that department. And that made her react. What? She whispered, incredulous. Is this some kind of sick joke? You want me, the person who sued your company, to come work for you, to be your employee? Is this a way to buy me? To silence me? No, he replied, his voice rising. It's the only way to fix the culture of this company. Who better to ensure we don't make the same mistakes than the person who was our greatest victim? Who would have more authority and credibility to do this than you? He stopped in front of her again. I don't want you to be my employee. I want you to be the conscience of this company. Maria's mind was in chaos. It was a trap. It had to be. A clever way to keep her under control. As if reading her thoughts, Arthur delivered the final blow. And none of this will be done in secret. Third and final step. I will make a public announcement to the press. I will admit Zenith's error in your case. We will issue a formal and public retraction, clearing your name of all the false accusations my team made. The company will publicly take full responsibility for the destruction of your career. This last part hit her differently. A public retraction, clearing her name. This was the only thing she had cried for years. The only thing money couldn't buy. It was the chance to have her dignity back. She looked at Arthur Sterling, the architect of her ruin, who now offered her the tools to rebuild not just her life, but herself. Distrust and anger still screamed within her, but beneath all the noise, a small, dangerous thread of hope began to emerge. The choice, for the first time in a long time, was hers. And it was an impossible choice, the unlikely alliance. Arthur Sterling's proposal hung in the air, so grand and unbelievable that Maria felt it could be a hallucination, a fever dream born of exhaustion. Her first reaction was a violent urge to laugh at his audacity, at the madness of that offer. Trusting that man was like trusting a fox inviting her into the henhouse, promising not to touch any chickens. The story of her life over the past 5 years was proof of his capacity for destruction. And why should I believe a single word of what you're saying? She asked, her voice low and filled with sharp distrust. 5 years ago, your actions promised me hell, and you were very efficient in delivering on that promise. Now you offer me heaven on a silver platter. Why should I think this time would be different? Arthur did not look away. There was no longer any air of superiority about him. What remained was a raw, weary seriousness. Because this time I saw the result, he said, his voice firm. I saw you and your son on that sofa. I can't unsee that anymore. You're right not to believe me, so don't believe me. Believe in your own strength. He took a step forward, and the gesture was almost a plea. I'm not offering you a gift. I'm giving you back the weapons I took from you. If I give you the position, the power, and the authority, you will have everything you need to do what is right. If I try to stop you, if I lie, you'll be on the inside. You'll be able to expose me in a way you never could before. His words, believe in your own strength, touched a deep place within her. A place she thought was dead and buried. For years, she had felt like a victim, powerless, swept away by a current of injustice she couldn't fight. His proposal, however suspicious, was a chance to stop being a victim and become a fighter again. She thought of the others, of the dozens of families she had represented, people who, like her, had lost everything and never received the justice they deserved. His offer wasn't just about rebuilding her life. It was about finishing the fight she started for them. It was a responsibility she had carried like a silent guilt for years. And then, she thought of Leo, her son, sleeping in a makeshift crib in a small, damp apartment. What future could she provide on a cleaner's salary? What example would she be? A mother broken by exhaustion and bitterness. Arthur's proposal meant more than money. It meant a stable home. It meant time to be a mother. It meant her son could grow up seeing his mother not as a defeated woman, but as someone who rose again and fought. The public retraction. That was the central point. The clearing of her name was the key that could unlock the doors to her future, restoring the dignity that had been stolen from her. After a silence that seemed to last an eternity, where Arthur merely waited without pressuring, she finally found her voice. "All right," she said. The word was so quiet that she barely heard it herself. Arthur held his breath, waiting. "I accept," she said louder now, and with the decision came a new wave of strength. "But it will be on my terms, with my conditions." "Whatever they may be," he responded instantly, relief clear on his face. "First," she began, and the lawyer inside her took control. "The public retraction. It will be drafted by me and by you, and it will be published in the major newspapers before I sign a single paper. I want my name cleared before I take the next step." He agreed with a nod. "Fair." "Second, autonomy. The new department will have full autonomy. No interference from your legal department. I report only to you. And my decisions on ethics and compliance are final. If there's an impasse, my word prevails." "Agreed," he said without hesitation. "And third," she stared at him, her eyes firm. "I don't want your pity. I'm not one of your charity projects. This is a job. I will fight for every penny for those workers like a lioness, and I will scrutinize every corner of this company with all the strength I have. If you regret it, back down, or try to sabotage me in any way, I swear I will use my position inside here to destroy Zenith's reputation in a way that will make the old lawsuit seem like a compliment. Are we understood, Mr. Sterling?" The frightened woman had completely vanished. In her place was the lawyer who had challenged him years ago, but now with the scars and strength that pain had given her. A small, almost imperceptible smile of respect formed on Arthur's lips. "Perfectly, Dr. Davis," he said. "Welcome back to the game, Dr. Davis." It had been so long since Maria heard someone address her that way, with that respect. For an instant, the image of the lawyer she once was, strong and confident, overshadowed the tired woman sitting in that chair. The feeling was both strange and deeply comforting. She took a deep breath, and the air that filled her lungs seemed different, lighter. The lawyer inside her was awake. "I need to go now," she said, her voice firm, cutting the intensity of the moment. "I need to pick up my son from the neighbor's house, who looks after him during the day." The mention of Leo was a reminder to both of them of the reality that had led her there. "Tomorrow. We can start working on the text of the public retraction tomorrow." "Of course," Arthur agreed immediately. His explosive energy gave way to a focused calm. "My assistant will contact you to schedule the best time. And Maria, please, don't return to the night shift. Never again. Consider your new salary valid from this exact moment. The company will cover any expenses you incur to organize your routine." Before she could respond, he picked up the phone on his desk. "Just a moment. I want you to be present for the first order. It's important that the leadership of this company understands the new reality from the start." He pressed a button. "Eleanor, ask Mr. Charles, the head of legal, to come to my office. It's urgent." Maria felt a chill. Charles was one of the lawyers on the team that had destroyed her. Facing him would be the first test. She remained seated, her posture erect, her heart pounding. But this time, it wasn't just out of fear. It was also out of anticipation. A few minutes later, the door opened, and Charles entered. He was a man in his 50s, with a permanently worried expression. His eyes passed over Maria with indifference, dismissing her as part of the scenery, before fixing on Arthur. "Mr. Sterling, you sent for me?" "Yes, Charles. Sit down," Arthur said, pointing to the chair next to Maria. "I want you to meet someone. This is Dr. Maria Davis." Charles looked at Maria again, this time with slight curiosity. The name seemed to sound familiar, but he couldn't place it on the face of the woman in simple clothes. "Starting today," Arthur continued, his voice calm and full of authority, "Dr. Davis is the new director of our newly created Labor Ethics and Compliance Department. She will also serve as a special consultant in the complete reevaluation of the lawsuit concerning the workers from the Midwest factory 5 years ago." Charles's expression changed dramatically. His jaw dropped, and the color drained from his face. He looked from Arthur to Maria, comprehension and shock etched in his eyes. He remembered the name now. He remembered it very well. "Mr. Sterling, with all due respect," he began, stammering. "A new department? Dr. Davis? The Midwest case was closed. It has been reopened by me," Arthur cut in. "Prepare all necessary documentation for the new department and for Dr. Davis's contract. She will have full and unrestricted autonomy, reporting only and directly to me. And, Charles, please arrange for the immediate cancellation of your contract with the outsourced cleaning company. Her salary will be that of a senior director, retroactive to today." Arthur stood up, putting his hands in his pockets, a casual posture that contradicted the bomb he had just dropped. "We made a grave mistake 5 years ago, Charles. A mistake I made by giving the wrong orders. And now we are going to fix it, transparently and definitively. Dr. Davis is here to ensure that justice is done, and to ensure that errors like this never happen again at Zenith." The public confession of guilt in front of his main lawyer was, for Maria, the most significant moment so far. It wasn't just a promise made to her in private. It was a declared change of direction for the company. Charles, pale and shocked, could only say, "Yes, sir. I will arrange everything immediately." "Excellent, you may go," Arthur said. The head of legal stood up and left the room, seeming to have aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The silence returned, but now it was different. It was the silence of a new beginning. "The first step," Arthur said, looking at Maria. "The rest of the way, we'll do together." Maria just nodded in agreement, still processing the speed of events. "Tomorrow," she repeated. She stood up and walked towards the door. As she left Arthur Sterling's office, she was no longer the invisible cleaner. She was not the destroyed victim, and she also didn't feel like a winner. She felt like a general who had just been given command of an arm to fight in a war she had already lost once. But this time, the most powerful enemy was, inexplicably, on her side. The blueprint for change. The days that followed were a test of nerves and trust. Maria and Arthur's first task, together, was to draft the public retraction. They sat side by side at his enormous conference table, a laptop between them. The silence that was once filled with fear and anger was now filled with a productive tension. Maria's distrust was still there, a vigilant sentinel in her heart. But she saw in Arthur a commitment that surprised her. "Here," he said, pointing to a sentence on the screen. "The language is too corporate. The company regrets the oversight." No, it wasn't an oversight. It was a mistake. A deliberate mistake. Write that. Maria looked at him, surprised by his brutal honesty. "All right." "And here," she replied, taking control of the keyboard, "where it says the consequences for the former litigant, let's change it to the complete and systematic destruction of Dr. Maria Davis's career and reputation. People need to read the exact words." Arthur swallowed hard, the pain of those words visible on his face, but he simply nodded in agreement. "You're right. It's the right thing to do." When the statement was published in major national newspapers a few days later, the effect was immediate. Maria Davis's name was everywhere, but this time not as an unethical lawyer, but as the victim of a corporate injustice that was now being rectified. Her phone didn't stop ringing. They were old colleagues, some offering support, others apologizing for having distanced themselves. Each call was a small piece of her old world being returned. Life at Zenith also changed. Maria moved into a real office on the same floor as the executive board. It was a clean, modern space, with a view she barely had time to appreciate. With the autonomy Arthur guaranteed her, she assembled a small team and began the monumental work of reopening the Midwest case. She spent weeks in front of spreadsheets, locating the former workers, calculating what was owed to them. It was exhausting work, but each name she crossed off the list was a victory, a small piece of justice being put in place. Arthur also changed. His directors saw him more frequently outside his office. He participated in Maria's new department meetings, not to give orders, but to listen. The relentless pursuit of profit still existed, but now there was a counterbalance. He found a new purpose, not just in leading a successful company, but in leading a just company. The transformation was subtle to some, but for those who observed closely, it was profound. For Maria, the biggest change happened at home. She moved to a bright, airy apartment in a safe neighborhood. Leo began attending the best daycare in the area, a place where he laughed and played with other children. For the first time in his life, his mother was home every night to bathe him, read him a story, and put him to sleep. The exhaustion that had defined Maria's life for so long gave way to a focused energy, the strength of a woman who was, finally, rebuilding her life on her own terms. Mended hearts, renewed purpose. 6 months later, on a Tuesday night, the door to Arthur's office opened softly. He looked up from a report and saw Maria. She wasn't wearing the gray uniform, but an elegant dark pantsuit. In her hands was not a trash bag, but a folder. She was the complete image of the powerful lawyer who had always been beneath the surface. "Sorry for the late hour," she said, "but I wanted to deliver this personally. It's the final report for the Midwest case. The last payment was confirmed this afternoon. It's done, Arthur. We achieved justice." He took the folder, an immense feeling of gratitude filling him. "No, Maria," he said in a low, sincere voice. "You achieved justice. I just had the good fortune to get out of your way." His gaze moved to the door, and his heart warmed. Standing there, holding his mother's hand, was Leo. He was no longer a baby, but a small child, looking at the large office with curious, bright eyes. Maria had picked him up from daycare and brought him with her. The image of that healthy, happy child, standing in the same spot where he had once found a mother and child sleeping in desperation, closed the cycle in a way that no words could. Arthur broke into a smile, the first genuine, unburdened smile he had given in a long time. He looked from Leo to Maria, the woman he had destroyed, and who, in some way, had saved him from himself. The past was not forgotten, but its wounds were finally beginning to heal. "He looks very happy," Arthur said. Maria looked at her son, and all the love in the world was in her eyes. "We are," she replied, her voice full of peace. "We finally found our way." A legacy of integrity. 3 years later, the afternoon sun streamed through the immense windows of Zenith Corp's new community center, illuminating an environment that bore no resemblance to the old, cold, impersonal headquarters. The space was vibrant, filled with plants, and the predominant sound was children's laughter. It was the 3-year anniversary celebration of the Restart Daycare, an initiative that had become the heart of the company's new culture, a symbol of the transformation Maria and Arthur had led together. Maria watched the scene with a serene smile. She wore a simple, elegant dress, and her face no longer carried the weight of exhaustion, but the light of fulfillment. Beside her, Arthur Sterling, his hair now showing a few silver strands, chatted animatedly with a group of employees. The lines on his face were no longer from stress and command, but from a contentment he had never known in his years of ruthless conquests. He saw her observing and approached, handing her a glass of juice. "Who would have thought we'd get here?" she commented softly, looking at the children running on the playground. "Not me," he admitted, with a sincerity that had become common between them. "There were many times, in the beginning, when I thought you would give up everything, that you would see it was a lost cause, and just walk away." Maria laughed, a genuine, light sound. "The temptation was there, but you kept your word, every single one of them." Their relationship, forged in the fire of distrust and guilt, had transformed into something neither of them could name. It wasn't a conventional friendship, but a deep mutual respect, a partnership based on brutal frankness and a common goal. Together, they had not only fixed a mistake, but built something new and better. "Mommy, look!" A boy of almost 4, with dark hair and bright eyes, ran towards them, holding a paper with a colorful drawing. It was Leo. He didn't run only to Maria. He held out the drawing so Arthur could see it too. "Look, Arthur, it's a rocket!" the boy said, with the naturalness of someone accustomed to that presence. Arthur knelt, getting down to Leo's level, and examined the drawing with full seriousness. "It's the best rocket I've ever seen in my life. Is it going to the moon?" "Yes, and back," Leo replied, before giving Arthur a loud kiss on the cheek and running back to the toys. Arthur stood up, his eyes moist with an emotion he no longer tried to hide. He looked at Maria, and in that look, there was all the weight of the past and all the lightness of the present. "Sometimes," he said, his voice thick, "I still remember that night, finding you both asleep on that sofa. I was such a poor man, Maria, amidst so much wealth." She touched his arm gently. "We were both lost, Arthur, but we found each other." He nodded, looking at Leo, who was now laughing at the top of a slide. The image was the answer to all questions, the cure for all pains. The future was no longer a threat or a burden, but a promise, personified in that small life full of joy. Together, side by side, they watched the boy play. They were no longer just the lawyer and the CEO, the victim and the villain. They were Maria and Arthur, and they were living proof that even after the longest and darkest of winters, spring always finds a way to arrive, bringing with it the chance not just to survive, but to finally flourish. The enduring lesson. This story reminds us of a profound and, at times, painful truth. Life can pull the rug out from under us in a way that feels definitive. How many of us have felt like Maria, invisible, even when we try our hardest, undervalued, after dedicating years to a career, a family, a dream? How many times has the world made us believe that our time has passed, that the best pages of our story have already been written? Maria's journey is the journey of many women. It is the pain of losing a name, an identity, and being reduced to a function, to a shadow that cleans up what others dirty. It is the silent strength of a mother who does the impossible for her child, putting his needs above her own exhaustion, her own humiliation. But the greatest lesson Maria leaves us is not in her fall, but in her extraordinary ability to rise again. She shows us that, even under the ashes of injustice and exhaustion, the ember of our true essence never goes out. The lawyer within her didn't die. She was merely dormant, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And this story also teaches us about redemption. It shows that compassion can be born in the most unexpected places, and that even a hardened heart like Arthur's can be transformed by the force of a human truth. It reminds us that it's never too late to look back, acknowledge our own mistakes, and instead of just apologizing, have the courage to try to fix them. For every woman who has ever felt defeated by circumstances, who has looked in the mirror and no longer recognized the dreamer she once was, this story is an embrace. It is a whisper that says, it's not over. Your inner strength is real. Your dignity is non-negotiable. And the opportunity to rewrite your own ending can appear when you least expect it. It's not about having the life you planned, but about having the courage to fight for the life you deserve, with the wisdom and resilience that only years can give us. True justice, after all, is not just punishing wrongdoing, but restoring hope. And hope, like a mother's love for her child, is the most powerful and transformative force in the universe. So, what did you think of the story? Leave your opinion in the comments. We love to know what you think. Don't forget to like the video to support us and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.